All right, so 7:30. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of myself. I am Kyle Ingram. I am the president and co-founder of Collab. Um, I am a musical artist, a producer, uh, visual content creator, director. I work a lot in creative entertainment. I do a lot of stuff. Um, Co-founded Collab with Ryan Fagan, who is also my business partner with Media FI Media. And you can give a brief introduction of yourself, and then I'll talk a little bit about why we started Collab.
Yes, I'm Ryan Fagan. I do a lot of things too. I work with Kyle. We have a video production company. I'm a local realtor and real estate investor. I'm a veteran. I did 4 years active duty. I including 15 months in Iraq. And I'm originally from Burlington Township, but I've lived kind of all over. And you know, we're pretty passionate about being active in the community.
So the reason we started Collab was it's been a long time coming. Actually, it's through a lot of conversations I've had throughout the years, a lot of looking at the cycle of violence, um, and the cycle of oppression that Black people face, and just the overwhelming feeling, particularly after George Floyd, of what what can we do to stop this cycle of watching violence happen to Black people, um, hitting the streets, making noise about it, having corporations do commercials, and then having it watching it happen again. What could we actually do to see changes? We all know that it's a systemic problem, but no one ever addresses the actual system. So we had a whole lot of conversations about this for we've been having them for a while, but I think, if you guys watched our videos, you would see that a lot of people with the George Floyd moment, that was the tipping point, and we decided that it was time for us to organize. We realized that no one's going to do it for us. There's no one that's going to come in and advocate for Black people. There's no organization that we could look to. That there are organizations that are there to help Black people. But there's no organization that is there to advocate for us in a way that would actively change the system in a way that we thought was necessary. So that is how Collab formed as an idea. The actual process of forming it, we were very lucky, blessed, whatever you want to call it, to get this group of people together. And it, everyone is so willing to give and so passionate about seeing equity and seeing change and seeing equality for everybody. And we created this organization. Um, and before I get into why we started Merchantville, let's bring in council person Andrew McClune. And I know he had something he wanted to say. We want to. I appreciate you coming in and taking the time to be here tonight. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Ryan. And again, I appreciate the invitation from Bridget and from the group to join. I'm really here in a capacity to listen. As I told Bridget, one of the things from my college days, there's a quote from Margaret Mead about never doubt a small group of people, thoughtful and committed individuals, because that's the way that the world can be changed. So again, a lot of the things that I think there's a lot of things that's been on our minds this year. It's been a tough, trying year, and again, I'm here to listen. I'll offer comments where possible, and see what type of action plan and solutions can be put together. So thank you.
Thanks again for coming. We appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas on what our goals are. one of the things that me and Ryan always talked about when we were talking about forming an organization was that we really wanted it to be solution based. Um, we are trying to address problems from the idea of how can we solve this instead of just talking about it. I think that we're at a point now in 2020 where most people, especially where we are in our communities, are at most aware of the issue. They might not recognize the issue in their community or how they contribute to it or how it affects the people around them, but they are aware that there is an issue. So have passed awareness and we are trying to take actionable steps. So let's talk about Merchantville for a second. There is a reason that we started in Merchantville. When we were looking at where to begin, we had this idea about what we wanted to do, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to do it and where we were going to do it. And April Grafals, who is our secretary now, at the time, she was just very active in our conversations. And she was talking about what she had been doing in Merchantville. And she'd been talking to Black residents, asking them what their experience was. And she had uncovered that there was a lot of unhappy business owners, particularly with the way that there was policing on the West End. This is what she was hearing from many citizens. So she brought that to us, and we thought that this would be a great, place that we could start to find an actionable goal. I'd love to introduce April. She's been such a great part of the team. She really helps everything run so smoothly, and I'm so happy to have her. But April, could you tell us a little bit about what made you want to go out and start asking these questions?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So, same like you, the George Floyd moment was a big moment, I think, for a lot of us. That feeling of, I need to do something. I'm crawling out of my skin. I don't know what I can do. And I took some guidance from Obama that the local level is a starting point for anybody. So I just had realized also that how silenced people were being, how Black voices were not being received. And if anybody here has been on like Facebook neighborhood groups, it can be great and it can get ugly. And I had seen it get ugly over and over when any Black woman had anything to say about the experience of being a Black person in Merchantville. So I just thought people need a way to speak on their experience that doesn't feel intimidating. And I've always been somebody people can speak to for whatever reason. So I just thought, let me just start speaking to people. And I had the okay from the mayor and the chief of police that if I spoke to people and I compiled some testimony, that they would look at it. So yeah, I just started calling businesses. I started messaging people on Facebook. I started, when I called businesses, they'd say, I have somebody else that would like to talk to you. So I got a lot of testimony that way. And that's how that started.
Excellent. And so what you said was very true. I think I don't know if I mentioned this about Collab, that we want to help on a local level. That's where you see the most direct change. That's where you see the most impact, and that's where you can really feel the changes happen as it's growing, as you try to work in the community. When you went out and you got those testimonies, what did you find, and how did that resonate with you? How did that make you feel?
I found that people living a mile from me were having a completely different experience of this town. And people who are in a darker skin than me are having a completely different experience in this town. And I'll speak a little more on the specifics of it when we get into the data, which we will. Right. But yeah, I found it felt like turning over a rock, to be honest. And I think I share the experience of a lot of white people that every time you think you understand, you learn a little more and you're humbled again that you didn't understand. So yeah, I felt angry. I felt humbled. I felt motivated to want to change things. Mm-hmm. I felt like a bull in a china shop, which I often do speaking about race, but we got to plow through those personal feelings. And I felt very inspired by the grace and the bravery that people would show me, even in talking about the difficulty they were having. But I definitely still felt pretty hopeless. I felt like, now I know all this. I have all this anecdote, right? Mm-hmm. What am I going to do with this? So I did walk away feeling helpless and hopeless. Since then, we started Collab and we are taking steps. And now that we have some of the data that we're going to be talking about tonight, I don't feel so hopeless. I feel like we do have a way forward.
Right, and I do want to talk about a little bit about the data that she is mentioning. When we decided to work with local communities, we were trying to figure out what the first step was. And one thing that we do not want to do is just work off of anecdote. Um, every individual can have a different individual experience, but when you're talking about changing systems, you have to have evidence that the system is not working. And to do that, you need data. So our first action as a group was to try to collect as much meaningful data that we could in the community to see what was actually necessary for change, what the community wanted to see change, what people were looking for, and what people's experiences were. And that was our first action. And April, in her actions, actually had a lot to do with us coming up with that idea. Another instrumental part of our board, Bridget, who is a board member, she has been such a great help in us in organizing the surveys and trying to help us figure out how to collect data in meaningful ways. And I'd like to introduce Bridget now and have her talk a little bit about that and have her introduce members of the community that have wanted to share their experience in Merchantville.
Thank you, Kyle. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bridget Austin, and I found out about Collab through a friend of mine. And again, same breaking point for all of us. For me, the thing that did it was knowing that he called out for his mother, and that was it. I have a Black son, and one day that could be my son, so I know I need to take action now that, so hopefully when he is grown, he won't have to deal with any of these issues. At least it will be somewhat mitigated. So when I found this group, I was really motivated. Got a couple other individuals that have done a lot of great work involved. We had a lot of people who volunteered to help us get this survey out to the community. We got a ton of information back, which we're going to share with you guys tonight. And hoping again that information will bring about change that is needed and wanted by the Black community within Merchantville, because they deserve that. And so with that, I am going to introduce a couple members of the community that are going to be speaking on their experience in Merchantville. First will be Antisha Meisner. And Antisha is a friend of mine. We met often walking on the mile, pushing way too many children, right? Wrangling a lot of kids. And Antisha was just elected to the Board of Ed in Merchantville, so congratulations, well deserved. And as well, we'll be hearing from Ivory Pardo tonight, another good friend. I've known Ivory for years. We worked together, Croc Center, taught yoga at his fitness studio, and he owns Essence Fitness Studio in Merchantville. Only person that can get my butt in shape. So he'll be talking after that. So first, let's go ahead and I'll hand it over to Antisha. And thank you for joining us, guys.
Hi, I'm Antisha, and I am a Merchantville resident, obviously. I moved to Merchantville in 2011, and I've been here ever since. I am a retired veteran Marine. I did 2 tours in Iraq. And my last 3 years in the Marine Corps, I was actually stationed in Brooklyn, New York. So it was a travel from there to here, but I was also on the reserve side, which is like 1 week in a month, 2 weeks of summer. But anyway, and I was a high school English teacher at Rancocas Valley. And now I am a mom to 3 kids, and you could probably hear one in the background, to 3 kids. No, you can't get in. 3 kids. My husband, my kids are biracial. My husband's white. Okay. So as you can see, and I have an online t-shirt shop, so I deal with that as well. And I know April and Bridget, like it. I met Bridget walking, the bike path with, as you can see, this one right here. And April, her son was in the same class as my daughter, so I got to talk to them all the time. Sir, I need you to go over there. Thank you. And some of my experiences, I actually would like to touch on my very first experience here in Merchantville. When I first moved to Merchantville, it was in April. And I'll never forget, I had a dog named Maya. She was a yellow lab. But she was like the lazy type. It was like the second or third day after we moved into our house, and she was laying in our front yard, just laying there, being Maya. And a older male had walked by with his dog. Then maybe 5-10 minutes later, a Merchantville PD came by and sat there and was like, you have to, basically, he was like, you have to put your dog on a leash. And I said, why do I have to put my dog on the leash when it's in my yard? And he said, well, we had got a report of a vicious dog. And he said, I can see she's not vicious, but, to be on the safe side, put her on the leash. So once again, I said, why do I have to put my dog on the leash when she's in a yard and she's in my yard and she's just laying there? And I guess when I started questioning him, his tone towards me changed. It was like, how dare you question me? Like I said, my husband is also a veteran Marine. He comes outside and he's like, what's going on? Because he's listening, he's like, what's going on? And the police officer's whole attitude changed. It was like, oh, okay, let me, I'll talk. Well, oh, she's married to a white man, I guess, basically. So I don't have to take that, I don't have to be that way with her. And when that first happened, I can tell you, I was very kind of like, wow, really? I was like, did I really just move into a town like this? However, being a Marine, I also know you can't judge one person, for the whole town. But ever since then, I see things differently of Merchantville. I love Merchantville. I actually encourage my friends and some of my family members to move to Merchantville. However, I also tell them this is Mayberry. You won't actually see Andy Griffin, but this is Mayberry. So if that's what you want, if you can get used to it, to do that. I've also been I've received comments about my kids. You just saw my son. And one of my children is actually like April's complexion. I've gotten, oh, is she yours? Or where do they come from? Like, what? What do you mean, where did they come from? And this is just walking down the bike path, oh, where did you get them from? And I'm sorry, I have a smart remark for all that. Usually if they ask me, where did I get them from? I'll say in aisle 9, they on sale or whatever. I mean, that's just the smart ass in me. I'm gonna say that plain and simple, so that I have experienced a lot of, and just knowing that there isn't a lot of, you don't see the Black culture or the Black community per se in Merchantville is something hard for me too, because here it's just like, it's all white. I feel like I'm not recognized. So that's one of the reasons why I want to speak out too on this forum, because I think it needs to be said without feeling like, oh my goodness, I just said that and now I'm afraid. So, that's why I chose to speak out.
I know before when we had talked, you had mentioned that like you feel like there's a good community, but you feel like there's not enough representation in local politics or on the school board, which is why you ran.
Yes.
You want to speak a little bit about that and about because I know you mentioned that you guys didn't do anything for Black History Month, which was a problem for you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So it's funny because I actually wrote down notes of stuff I wanted to say and didn't even look at the notes. But here, yeah. So like you said, as long as I've been in Merchantville, I have not seen any person of color on the council or on any committee per se that would be relevant to, and I don't want to say running Merchantville, but that is that basically runs Merchantville. I don't see people of color on there, and I think that's the issue. And I just looked at my notes, and one of the things too is I think a couple years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we got our first Black police officer, and the excitement over that was very disturbing to me. I felt like, I love Merchantville, don't get me wrong, and I've made a lot of friends, and I am a military person, and I was always like, civilians, but I've made a lot of friends. So once I got out of that, it was like, okay, but then we get to, we have our first Black police officer, and it's like everyone was excited about it. And to me, and I said to my husband, yes, they have a Black police officer now, but why is that like a good thing? Don't they see that as also being like a bad thing as well? This is a historical town. It's been around for how long? And you're just now having your first Black police officer. And then it was, I guess another Hispanic police officer was like, or half Hispanic or whatever, was brought up to, like, was hired. I don't think that's something. I mean, yes, let's celebrate that we have a Black police officer, but on the same token, shouldn't you look and say, oh, wow, we got our first Black police officer and it's like 2018, 2017? That should raise some concern. I just feel like some members in Merchantville, and I want to say white people in Merchantville, don't realize that that's, for me as a person, as a Black person, that's almost like a slap in the face. That's like when someone says, oh, I have like 2 Black friends. So now you count how many Black friends you have. You know what I mean? So it's like, you can't, we don't have enough. We're not represented enough within the community, and
Right.
it's not, and the community is very diverse. I want to say that too, that the community is very diverse, yet you don't see that within the school's teaching staff, or within like I said, the council or any of the committees. Like you said, with the schools, they don't celebrate Black History Month. That's just, it's just like a thing for me, where how do you not celebrate Black History Month? I'm a firm believer in, I don't think we should just have one month, because I believe Black history is American history. However, we have to have a Black History Month because it's not acknowledged. And so for you not to even acknowledge it during that month, what does that say? And I'm a firm believer that it starts at home and then it gets carried on in school, And if we're not teaching Black History Month in school, what are you telling those kids who are Black, or biracial, that you pretty much don't matter? And even as a community, Merchantville as a community doesn't celebrate Black History Month. I've seen different communities here in like South Jersey around us that celebrate, they'll have a Puerto Rican parade, they'll have those different type of things, but not Merchantville, So I feel like as a whole, we need to be recognized more.
More representation. I want to bring in Ivory here, and thank you, Antisha, for sharing that. We appreciate you coming out. It's necessary that we have people that speak out on how they actually feel, and I'm sure Ivory has some things that he would like to say. So Ivory, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you for the floor, Kyle. Kyle, Ryan, again, thank you both for, first and foremost, providing this platform and opening this dialogue. Bridget, April, thank you both for your contributions towards pushing the cause, asking the questions to get the members of the community engaged in dialogue, because I think this is a fundamental first step in addressing the need for change. It's one thing to speak about legislative action and changes, but it starts with dialogue. And Andrew McClune, your presence, obviously, you're representing the community from a leadership standpoint, and thank you for your presence on the call also. As it relates to my experiences in Merchantville, I was raised about 3 miles away from where my facility is. I'm a current business owner in Merchantville. I've been in town for 4 years now, 4 full years. And I have been fortunate because I actually grew up 3 miles from this location, and traveling from Camden, where I was raised, inner city, completely different lifestyle, traveling through Merchantville just to get to the local mall. I was consistently harassed and pulled over by the police in my teenage years, to the point where, I was ridiculed by my friends and family for even driving through Merchantville. It's almost expected, as if though, as a young youth, black youth, you definitely shouldn't even be driving through Merchantville. So my friends and family always attacked me because they felt I was asking for it. You can't go through that community with a hood on your hoodie on, or a fitted cap on. All these things were just drawing attention, on top of the fact that I was already black. So it was almost deemed I was asking to get pulled over. And sure enough, I was pulled over quite a bit. I'd say anywhere between 10 to 15 times I could have been pulled over in my early 20s, um, driving through Merchantville for minuscule reasons. And we know what the actual reasons are. But I say all that to say that I've seen quite a bit of progress in Merchantville over the last 4 years that I've been here. Is it late? Yeah, absolutely, it's late. Merchantville as a borough was established, I think, in 1874. You're talking about almost 150 years of history of establishment of a community, and for that community to be diverse, like Antisha stated. You see it in the school system; it's diverse, but it's not represented in a diverse community within the staff members or the educators within the school system. It's not represented within the council. It's not represented within various departments, the fire department, the police department. And when I first came to Merchantville as a business owner, the police never addressed me, never spoke to me, but they would park directly across the street from my facility and sit there for hours at a time, just watching, never coming in, never asking any questions. They were just sitting outside and just watching my facility for hours at a time. This continued for probably the first 6 months that I was in business. And as time will go on, I will collaborate with other businesses. And there's been quite a influx of diverse business owners within Merchantville. And that's been something promising. But again, it's underrepresented in critical areas. And Teddy has been a mayor that at one of the forums we've had late in the summer came out and opened that forum stating that Black Lives Matter. And that's a major, um, entity in itself, that a political leader or figure would take that position. So I applaud him for taking that position. I applaud Teddy for his acts in trying to support diverse business owners within the community. Um, Mayor Brennan has been strategic in his efforts to start a diversity community to kind of engage members of the community in dialogue and get the ball rolling. Obviously, these things for a town that's been established for almost 150 years, it seems like it's late coming, but it is progressing. It is happening. And I do support the mayor and his efforts and April has been very progressive with her actions to help improve how the community operates. I know you, Ryan and Kyle, I know you both are actively focused on legislative change. And this call is, a step towards, again, getting dialogue so that we can move towards legislative actions to support some of these things that we're discussing tonight. But I do see a change on the horizon, and it requires a changing of the hearts of the people. Um, COVID has hurt the Black community, the minority community extensively. And um, these racial disparities that we see have come to the forefront. When you go into the borough hall, and if you sat in there for a court hearing, you wouldn't see diversity. You would see my majority of the people represented facing whatever charges they may have to address in court. it's going to be people of color, you know, disproportionately represented in those negative circumstances, you know, far too often. And it's not just a Merchantville issue. This is an American issue. You know, this is, so I like the grassroots approach that we're taking by having this engagement, because this is where the momentum starts and change can begin from platforms such as this. So I just wanted to share my experiences coming from a young kid who couldn't drive through this town to now being a business owner in this community. My kids play here. I walk and bike on that trail with my children. When the farmers market was going on in the community, my children were vibrant, engaged. Other members of the community, Bridget, her children, and Tisha's children, our kids all interact and play with each other, you know. And this can be a dynamic town for all members who reside in this community, but we have to be willing to take the steps necessary to engage and seek change.
Thank you for sharing all that, Ivory. I have one quick question. You know, when you had your business, and you know, you said that you noticed the police were sitting out there for like the first 6 months. I wanted to ask you personally, why did you not address them? Why didn't you call them or go up to them? And I want your honest answer on that.
Honestly, because I knew the answer. I knew why I was being watched like this. I knew that this was not common practice. I've attended 2 different medical schools. I'm a highly educated, intelligent individual. So I knew exactly what was going on. I knew I was being profiled, and it angered me. So I said I refused to cave in and go to them and play that role, you know. So I just continue to go about my business and be professional from my position as I could be.
I appreciate that answer. One of the things that we want to do with Collab is to empower Black citizens to participate in government, and participate in making their presence felt. So many times as residents, we are comfortable as long as we are not being bothered, and we don't frequently speak up to the things that we want to see change, because we don't want to disrupt we don't want to rock the boat for fear of being thrown off. We don't want, you know, we don't want the spotlight on us. We just want to try to live comfortably. So to Ivory's point, many times, you know, we don't call police, right? Like if, you know, if there's a Black family and they had a lost pet or a lost cat in a tree or something, they're not going to call the police for that. That's something that they'll try to get a ladder, because that's not how we view the system. And this is not just Merchantville, this is across the country. And this is one of the things that we are hoping to change. We want to make sure that Black people feel a part of the system. And to do that, we have to participate, but there's so many things that have to change. Like, you know, Ivory said, it has to start with changing of the hearts. But I think that we also have to change, we have to empower them. And I think as Collab, as an organization, that's something that we wanted to work on and do. And Tisha, you want to say something? You can hop in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like going off of what you said as well. And I think it's time to have real conversations. Let's stop being politically correct. Let's stop saying to ourselves like, oh, I can't say that because I might offend someone. If, you know, and if you feel that way, maybe rephrase it to a way that you don't think you would offend someone. But I think you have to be honest. You have to be honest and have an honest conversation. And I think I brought this up before when we spoke. My husband's wife, the first time I met my sister-in-law, she asked me, she said, do Black people have hair on their body? And I said, and I laughed because I never was asked that before. And I said, yes. And she said, because she didn't know, because she had never, like, she said, you can't see it. And then when she saw it, she's like, okay. And I had always told his side of the family, you know, my husband's side of the family, just ask me. Don't assume. Let's not make any, you know, prejudges or anything like that. Just ask me and we'll have a real conversation. I said, I'd rather you ask than say something ignorant or do something ignorant or just not know. Because
Right.
I think that's the worst thing is to, and it's not, and I'm not saying it's intentional, because some people don't even realize they say something and it's intentional, and it's unintentional that they say something and then that offends another person, So I understand that, but I think it's also having realistic realistic conversations, meaning there are differences in cultures and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Just because I'm Black and just because my husband's white doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like, I think I spoke about this before. Like, there's certain ways how, he was raised and how I was raised. And in certain cultures that you see those differences, and it doesn't mean that is wrong. It's just that that's how those cultures are. And
Right.
once society as a whole start accepting, just because you have different traditions or different ways of doing things doesn't mean it's bad. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad either. I think that's been lost in society as well. It's always talked about, oh, this, America is a melting pot. You have all these different things. And yes, it is a melting pot. However, you can't, like, if you go outside that melting pot, which to me is normally white, then then it's wrong.
Yeah, see, I think that differences should be celebrated, definitely should be talked about. But when Black people get into white spaces, when if we enter municipal court, we should not be afraid to be Black. There's a lot of times that we are afraid to be ourselves, and that is something that I am pushing against. I'm trying to, I'm hoping that Collab and that everything we do will help Black people feel more comfortable in just being who they are and understanding that they are allowed to be in these spaces. A lot of times we just feel like, it's like in the realm of politics that we don't belong there. And that's something that I'm hoping to change. And with that, I want to get to the information we collected and talk about some of the changes that we've actually started on doing, some of the work we've actually been doing. I'm going to share the data that we collected. I don't know if you guys were aware, but we did some surveys this summer. And here is what we collected. So there's the population. What you're looking at here is a pie chart that shows the population of Merchantville. There's approximately 3,713 people. We surveyed 188, which is 5%, which, if you're unfamiliar with the world of surveys, it seems very insignificant. However, that's pretty significant chunk of change for most surveys. I mean, when you look at those national polls, when they were doing for the elections, a lot of times that's only 1% to 2%. And we got 5%, and we actually got a really good indicator of what the population demographics look like, as you can tell in this slide. The Merchantville demographics are 69% white, 17% Black, 6% Latin or Hispanic, and 9% other. And we surveyed our surveys that came back, the people, we asked them, what their race was or what they identify as, and 15% of them were Black, 59% were white, 13% were other, and 13% were Latin or Hispanic. And that is a pretty good. So when we're looking at trying to collect data, this gives us a pretty good view of how this is being represented, like who's answering these questions and who they represent in Merchantville. So one of the things we asked was, would you like to see more police officers engage with the community? Black and white people overwhelmingly said yes. Hispanics said no. And this, it means a lot. I think they want to see, there was a lot of anecdotes and notes talking about, they want to see foot patrols. They want to have more community engagement with police. They want to make sure that the police know their name. They want to feel more comfortable with the police officers who are policing their town. That was a lot of what the comments were for that question. One of the things that I do want to say about this data that we're looking at is that we also have to remember the biases and the way different people answer, right? So when a Black person says they want to see engagement with the community from a police officer, that might be extremely different from what a white person is looking at, because we have different experiences of police. A lot of these numbers are very similar, but when we get to the other data, you'll see why I'm cautious about just how these answers are being answered. Do you think racism is a problem in Merchantville? 52% of Black people said yes. 52% of white people said yes. 61% of Hispanics and Latin people said no, it's not an issue. And so that, that's a very close margin. It's 50%, 2%. That's not a lot, but there definitely seems to be people want to see change. So what are the changes they want to see? Do you believe people are racially profiled? Black people specifically on the West End. Black people said yes, 33%, 19% were unsure, 48% said no. 35% of white people were unsure. I do think that people answered these surveys pretty honestly, and I really appreciate that. I think that we got pretty good engagement, especially considering that, we're a new organization and we were going, we dropped some off door to door. We got some answers digitally, and I appreciate the honesty. And what would you recommend Merchantville to a person of color? Everybody said yes, which is great, and even from, Antisha and Ivory's testimonies, you can tell that Merchantville seems to be a great place to live and a great place to build businesses and raise kids. So, we want to get into what changes would you want to see. Blue is government representation. That is overwhelmingly the largest thing that people are looking to see based on this survey data, which means that, they said school board, council seats, on the police force, people want to see a little bit more representation. 11% said school system. There seems to be, neighbor relations is also a large chunk. And policing was a smaller chunk than we had initially anticipated based on what April had told us before about the stops on the West End, which is why we initially came to Merchantville. So briefly, when we got the survey data back, we were looking for what we had anticipated we didn't really see because I believe in transparency. I want to be as transparent as possible. All the information that we have, I want everyone to have, because I think it's important that we share data. So we were expecting, based on the anecdotes that we had heard, that we would see more Black people look for changes with policing and want to see change in policing. We were careful. We didn't want to write questions that led them there. We wanted everyone to answer honestly. And we were surprised that the data was pretty much the same between Black and white people on those issues. And it wasn't until we got the data from the Merchantville Police Department that we compiled into graphs and we mapped out that we really began to see that I think that there is a discrepancy between Black people's experience and white people's experience with police, which happens, this is America. That's what happens in America. And so now we're going to take
we want to real quick. So, I mean, I think what we spoke about the data before is that we don't want to disregard it. I mean, I think it's pretty good overall, for Merchantville. But one of our hypotheses, which we might need to do some more research, but Black people have a different bar for policing and, representation and stuff like that. So when those things are asked, as long as you don't have like an overtly problematic situation, you'll probably say that it's at least satisfactory or okay. Meanwhile, other people might have a higher bar for the police. So, that's kind of what our interpretation was, especially when we lead into the next slide.
Right. If you're expecting a 5-star restaurant, that you might have different ideas of what that is. So when we got the police data, which we just recently got, it kind of confirmed what April was saying and what we initially had thought. So we'll look at the demographics again, same percentages. But if you look at the pullovers, and this is from 2018 to 2019, you'll see that it is overwhelmingly people of color, Black and Hispanic, with 35% of the pie being Black and 38% of it being Hispanic. And that speaks to a much larger problem. When you look at the stops by race and outcome. By outcome, we mean were they issued a ticket, no action, or a warning. Blacks and Hispanic people were issued more tickets, and they were issued at a much higher frequency. So you can see here that it was 56% for Hispanic people, 52% for Black people.
So you have a higher chance of getting pulled over, and you have a higher chance of receiving a ticket as a colored person, basically.
Right.
By about, what, 15% there?
Yeah, it's like 15. The warnings were actually pretty similar, but there's a much higher frequency of even getting pulled over. So I mean, it's just much more disruptive. And then when we're looking at the map, I'd love April to hop in here because she did a lot of this mapping. You have the stops mapped out as to where exactly the hotspots are for the stop. So April, if you could explain what we're looking at here.
Sure. Can you see me right now?
Let me see.
Or I could just talk.
Yes, I can see you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Kyle. So what we are looking at is pretty much exactly what people had spoken to me about, which if you look at the end of town, that you see a big red circle and you see the number 218 and you see big red circles all around it. This is an area of town which is predominantly Black and Black businesses. And it is the area of town where people come from Camden, which is a predominantly Black city. If you look on the other side of town, the east side, you see these smaller pink dots. I can't speak to the exact demographic in this area, but this is where I live. And like I had said originally, what people are dealing with on one end of town is a completely different situation from what they're dealing with on the other. And I actually have some things to say about what you were saying, Kyle, about what do we mean when we say this is good, the policing is good. So Kyle, do you think this is a good time for me to get into that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So when I look at this, and when I looked at that data from the two pie charts showing that as a white person, I'm making up like 60% of our population, but I'm only 20% of pullovers here. And when you look at now at the Black side here, 15% of our population, but 35% of our pullovers. This is a statistical portrait in white privilege and in discrimination. And if we look back down, please, at that map again. So when I see this big red 218, it is a number that we can look to know that there's a hot spot there. But we also know from testimony what it represents to people. And this is where I would like to get a little bit into what people actually told me they're dealing with. People living and having businesses in and around this area. These big red dots represent anxiety. They represent lost business. They represent not inviting family to visit. They represent hypervigilance, sometimes humiliation, being pulled over and asked, whose car is this? Because you got a new car. I mean, the things that white listeners out there, we don't live with this. And so these red dots represent taking different routes to and from your own place of business. They represent court appearances that don't make a difference. They represent expensive tickets. And they represent not standing outside of your own business to smoke a cigarette with your friends because you're nervous about the police presence. So then if we look at these pink dots, they represent a whole different experience. And when I spoke to an individual who I won't name, but I did speak to an individual at the PD, at the police department, about my extreme concern about what I heard. This individual compared this big red dot, 218, to one of these smaller dots and said, there's hot spots in town where we pull people over. And I said to this person, you happen to have mentioned somewhere that's right on the end of my own street. And I can tell you, I'm not living with any of this. These smaller pink dots, they represent the police not having much of an impact on your life at all. They represent never worrying about what route you're going to take into town or that your family's going to get pulled over. And they represent a level of comfort with the officers that's not present. So when we talk about what is good policing, it is very important, I think, for me to share with white people, again, who may not have had these conversations, that every person I spoke to that's living with this red dot of anxiety, I said, how's the policing going for you? And all of them said, good, but, and then they got into all these things that in my experience, I would never call good. None of that's good. My standard for policing is really high, and it's borne out in these statistics. And so what I want to say to white people about all of this is that when we see our privilege clearly in front of us in these statistics, it's now our mission to just make this privilege the standard. And if we have actual numbers for what it feels like to not worry about the police, it means that throughout the 2-year period, there were maybe 50 pullovers at the end of your street, not 218, and then down the block 134, and around the corner 80 more. That is not the standard. When we're able to chart what white privilege actually looks like, then we can make it the standard. And so I hope everybody listening who knows about their white privilege, and it makes you uncomfortable, right? It makes you, what do I do about this? What we can do is make that privilege our standard. And that's why I'm so excited and encouraged that having had these conversations, now we have the data, and we can come back again in a year and look and see how is this looking, and come back again and see how is this looking, and use the same level of demand that we have. We expect to receive good policing. And by good, like I said, they're not interfering with our life. And like, personally, I needed the cops one time since I moved in here for like a health hazard on the block. They were professional, they were friendly, they were thorough, they were helpful, and then they were gone again. That is good policing. A cop driving behind me on Maple Ave does not make me nervous. And this main street you're seeing is Maple Ave. It does not make me nervous because I know my car's in order and I'm driving fine. So I'm not worried about him. That's good policing. We need to make it our standard. And one way we can all work on this together is our professional skills. Give our professional skills towards this kind of clarity, this kind of oversight. My husband, Ken, is a software developer, and he was able to take a lot of raw data from the PD and give us these charts. Everybody has that professional skill that they can give towards the effort of making our white privilege the standard and tracking it and insisting on it. And so thank you. That's what I have to say about that. And I just want to shout out to my husband because he spent so many hours. He had a fire in him to see this.
We all want to shout out to Ken because Ken, you did a great job with mapping out this data. It was it's very necessary. April, that was a very powerful testimony. I think it's something that we need to hear.
Thank you.
So again, when we're looking at this data, this shows the disproportionate stops, and it's not. This is what systemic racism looks like. It's not one person pulling over Black people 218 times. It is a system that has been designed, and there's implicit bias. And to be honest, I'm not sure if they are aware that this is what this looks like. This is the first time that we have revealed this information that we got, and I think it's powerful to look at the information this way. But that is what's necessary to create systemic change. We have to understand how systems work and what we're looking at. So I want to briefly get into what we're going to do about when we have all this data. Why, what do we do with the surveys? What do we do with this information about the stops? So we've partnered with, we have like a whole bunch of things that we want to go forward in the future and doing. And our initial plan is to create legislation, with local governments to try to stop these things. But, when we looked at the surveys, we were looking at a lot of different avenues for, representation and what we could do to educate in the school system. So we have a few things coming up that I would like to list real briefly. Hold on while I'm looking for the list of things that we are going to do.
Kyle, do you
go ahead.
Want me to speak on the PTA thing?
I was actually going to bring that up right now. We're co-sponsoring an educational forum with race with the PTA, which Bridget is heading off on that department. So you can speak about what that's going to look like and talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I've coordinated with the Merchville PTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And we are hoping with them to co-sponsor an event, hopefully sometime in March. We don't have an exact date yet, but it will be a virtual forum that we offer to parents on kind of an introductory topic, something such as how to talk to your children about race, just to get the conversation going, and to take away some of that maybe unsure feeling that parents have. What is the right thing? What is the wrong thing to say? How do I start this conversation? Things such as that. You'll see more information on that as it comes closer, and we'll have somebody, an outside speaker, coming to do the presentation, and there should be a question and answer portion as well at the end. And then actually, Kyle, Jessica Stewart is here.
I see that. Yeah, I was going to introduce her.
Maybe
Yep.
she will speak on that kind of plan. But thanks for being here, Jess.
Hey, girl. No, I wanted to thank you guys for letting me come on and speak to those kinds of things. For people that don't know me, I'm Jess Stewart. I've lived here in Merchantville since 2013. And pretty much as soon as I moved into town, Mayor Ted Brennan had sort of looped me in to try to get me involved on different levels of the government. And I have to tell you guys, like, it is seeing the chart. One, what you guys do with Collab, I have to applaud all you guys, because since I've lived in this town in 2013, and being on the committees that I am in on town, I'm usually the only person of color on it. It's a very lonely club, just being the one token, and it stinks, but knowing that people are interested and want to get involved gives me hope to hopefully, even after this, if people want to reach out to me, I'll shoot out my phone number to whoever, if you guys want to, text or email me or whatever, to try to get involved. I please absolutely would love to have you on board. But I am actually on planning board, the joint land use board in town. A lot of people, when they think, they think of the different levels of government and how they want to see representation, they usually think of like council or school board or like the policing and stuff. But I don't think a lot of people realize that there are other levels of government that you can be on. Like I said, I'm on the joint land use board, which is a pretty big committee on town. It pretty much dictates. We try to. What we do is we're responsible for the town's master plan and trying to I guess, like, yeah, we're in charge of the town's master plan pretty much. But it sort of shows like sorry, I had a brain fart. Like we're responsible for the master plan, which basically dictates how a town looks physically, economically, and socially, and how it develops that way. So it's a big deal. It's an appointment that you would need to be on. You would need to be appointed by the mayor or by the council, but we have openings every once in a while. But there's also like the Shade Tree Commission, their Historical Preservation Committee. There's a bunch of other committees to get involved in that we would love to have people on. I can't speak enough about, like, as we mentioned a lot of times, it's a very diverse town. It's a great town to be in, but it would be great to have a town that reflects the people that lives in it. So having people of color, having somebody that even speaks Spanish on some of these boards, because there's a huge Latino population, would be huge. And I'm also the president of the Merchantville Democrats too. I was sort of voluntold to take over it, which I am proud to do. In my real life, my day job, I'm a political consultant. So I work for the Democrats professionally. So I would love to, give back and help out in any kind of way, get my professional expertise to the town in any way possible. So this year has been hard for meetings, but we would like to try to restart it up again next year, because we do have a few races, and it's a big legislative year too, next year with the governor being up and everything. So yeah, if anybody wants to get involved, I'm always looking for people. We're, like I said, we're restarting the Merchantville Dems next year. We have a lot of positions open for that. I know Antisha mentioned, doing a Black History thing. I would love to do something in town with that too. If, we can sponsor it with the Merchantville Democrats or whatever, we can have I think there's a lot of ways to improve. I think that having this organization though definitely helps to bring all voices
Well,
together and connect a lot of dots that, we were missing before.
well, we appreciate you taking the time to, join the meeting and to bring your presence. And as you just said, one of the things we want to do is to create some events that would help, educate specifically around Black culture, because that's kind of what we represent. But we would definitely love to help create some community events and maybe potentially partner with you. And one of the other aspects, the other branch of Collab, is our Black Pack, which is it's a branch where you can donate to, so we can, it's basically like a super PAC where we can then use that money to help, push candidates that we like. And that, I know that's something that we definitely want to see in Merchantville. Representation is definitely something that everyone continues to mention, and that you mentioned about being the only one up there. We are looking for a couple people in Merchantville that we would be supportive of their campaigns in the many ways that we could do. That's another solution that we saw based on the surveys and based on all the testimony that we had. And yeah, so we're going to be trying to figure out exactly what's the best way to use the police data that we just really mapped it out this week. And we have to really digest it to figure out what's the best course of action, or what we think is the best course of action in terms of trying to make it more equitable and make it more equal for everybody. But we think it's important to share that. I'd like to, have a little bit of discussion with everybody. I want to open the floor up a little bit. Well, before I do that, I would like to mention to anybody watching, if you want to help join with Collab, you can go to www.collabnj.org. There are donate buttons everywhere. You could donate to us, or you could volunteer. We are looking for volunteers in various departments. As April said, this is a great way to use your professional skills, or use skills that you have an interest in. It doesn't have to be your job. You could be interested in it. You could just have a hobby, or something that you're really good at and you want to donate those services. This would be a great way to get involved, and we would love to have you. We are a very new organization. We just started this summer. So we would appreciate all the support, or any support that you could give. And with that being said, I'd love to continue this conversation. I'd like to start, I don't want to put you on the spot, but Councilman McClune, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. And then we can, if you guys have anything you want to say, I would love to do that.
Thank you, Kyle. It's a little tough I think for me to be as a government representative. I think it causes me to choose my words carefully. I like to really just kind of speak of someone who's grown up in this town. I've grown up here my whole life, and Bridget can attest to a certain, for the history. I went to St. Pete's on Merchantville, and the first Black kid that I had in my class wasn't until 8th grade in 1993. And I went to Bishop Eustace, which is probably the school of white privilege. There was probably 5 Black kids in that school, and we would joke. It actually wasn't a joke, but it was the basketball team. Okay, and now this new community, and I think I saw it in some of your statistics and data. Merchantville 80s and 90s was probably 90 percentile, probably much higher than that, maybe close to 100. It was a very homogeneous community. And I think I saw on the survey that it's 59%. And I love the Merchantville today. I think the diversity is a strength. And what I was able to listen to when we had the event in Wellwood Park, Ivy, I still remember your words from there. Many other people really resonated with me. Gave me a different, a better appreciation of what makes this community great. And what brings a tear to my heart is for my kids are not going to have the same Merchantville experience that I had growing up. You know, they're going to be playing with Bridget's kids, hopefully Antisha's kids if we ever get past the pandemic. But it's, I think they're going to have a better upbringing than I think the people who love their upbringing in Merchantville had in the 80s and 90s. From representing us, speaking, you know, from the police perspective, I am the director of police in my borough council role. Antisha, you made the point about the report of the vicious dog, and I think one of the things that bothers me when I have to kind of read off some of the reports is when you see those suspicious people reports or those type of things. And I know there's been incidents in town where people maybe have been called on by the police because of the color of their skin. And that upsets me because it doesn't put our police in a good position to be successful. And April, I think you pointed out on social media probably about 3 or 4 months ago that the Attorney General did take some legislation, and it doesn't compel the police where they're obligated by law that if someone's called and there's a racial bias in the call, you know, that it's, you know, there's common sense will hopefully prevail. Ivory, again, appreciate what you've shared and you know, your thoughts about the courts on Wednesday nights and how that looks. I mean, that's something I think we need to continue to talk about and understand what can be. I don't know. I don't have the solution, but I would love to continue that conversation. The objective data, April, I'm also going to applaud Ken for doing a great job to find a solution on what was presented. The way that he analyzed the data was actually very closely to how I looked at it as well too. The only thing and I don't want to undercut one of the slides because that's not what I'm here, but I think when you have the Merchantville demographics versus the reports, maybe take the demographics of the larger community, you know, Pennsauken and Camden. Again, I think we need to spend more time talking about the data there. And again, you know, there's not to defend to the issues. I'll tell you one of the things I think affected the most when I first became a member of Merchantville Council. I ran with a woman named Catherine Swan, and she has a husband of color, Otto. And I was at her shop over Duck Duck Goose when it was over in Collinswood, and I probably listened for over an hour of the harassment and things he got, the driving while black, and you know, you hear stories every now and then in the news, but I think that really kind of shook me and understood that you know, there is a different world where there's people are treated differently because of the color of their skin. I am proud of the police department here in Merchantville and the government. I think we're fortunate in New Jersey that I think we're pretty progressive. We don't have a lot of things that are in other parts of the country. Doesn't mean there's an opportunity for us to continue to improve, but reiterate what, you know, some of the things that came out of the forum. Yes, we want more foot patrols, bike patrols. We've had 469 what we call positive engagements with the community. You know, we've you know, the police department has turned over a lot in the last few years, and you know, I can't speak to, you know, Antisha, what happened 8 or 9 years ago, and when someone makes you feel small, that stays with you no matter what. If someone, I understand that. But we do have a younger force, a more open-minded. There could be more of I think of a generational thing where we want to get people out of the cars, engaging the neighbors and not looking at their smartphones. But whether it's the quarterly forums, coffee with a cop, other type of events to get together, and again, continue to have an open ear and an open mind from groups such as yourselves. To understand, you know, there's not going to be a perfect society, but anything we can do here to make this community the best, you know, I'm all for it.
We appreciate you coming. I appreciate you taking the time and for saying what you said and giving your honest appraisal of what the work that we've been doing. I one of the reasons again that we started Collab is because we don't expect local governments or governments at all to have the solutions. Part of our goal and part of our identity is to try to find solutions ourselves, to look at the problems and to then bring them and have dialogues with you guys and see what can we actually do. So the fact that you're here and you're willing to have that dialogue with us so that in the future when we have potential ideas for these solutions to these problems means a lot to us as an organization, and we appreciate it. And on another note, I also went to Bishop Eustace for 1 year, and I also played on the basketball team. So that was accurate. But I'd love to, open up the floor to some of the people that came in, and see how you
Well,
see what you
Kyle,
guys
can I
felt.
quickly respond to something that Andy said?
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks for all of that. I just want to make it clear that when I did speak to someone at the PD, I don't think that anybody's trying to hide this data. I don't think that this person was aware that there's such a disparity between the two hotspots that this person had spoken about. So that's why this kind of data is so essential, because we can all be doing our best, and we can all be thinking that we're doing well. But as white people, we have giant blind spots, and we have inherent issues. Like I'm a teacher, I'm a trained teacher. And so I know that I should regularly be monitored to make sure I'm not calling on too many male students, because that happens with teachers, even from a woman, even from someone who would never think they were doing that. So I definitely think that I'm also proud of this police department. I'm proud how they've worked with us. I'm proud of the conversations we've had. And I hope that they also will be glad to see this data, to see, hey, I thought things were kind of similar on both ends, but they're not at all. I don't think it's an individual with any ill will. And I think what I'm saying is I think you're right to be proud of them. And I think we are on a good track. And now we have a way of monitoring the situation with data to, because no individual person can see these trends happening in their day-to-day life while they're doing their job. So that's the kind of oversight we need.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing about I mentioned this earlier, when you look at data like this, it speaks more to the changes that are necessary for a system. I'm often wary of even just like diversity, right? If you plug a Black person into a system that is inherently oppressive to Black people, it doesn't necessarily change that system. Now you just have a Black person in this oppressive system. We have to change the actual systems and how they work. So that way it is more equitable for everybody. I mean, so you can have a system that's broken and you could put great people in it, but if the system's not working, it's just going to be frustrating for them, and you're still going to have similar results. So we are here to try to analyze these systems of inequality and try to make them more just. And that's the position that I'm coming from as a general overview. It's not to attack individuals, it's to look at how we got to this place and what can we do to properly address it from the ground up, which is a difficult thing to do. A lot of times people are set in the ways that they've been doing them, or they feel like this is, good enough. I'm very glad to hear you say that. I understand that, New Jersey is much more progressive than many parts of America, most of America. And, and Merchantville seems to be it's a very progressive place as well. And even there, we still have room for improvement. And as long as we are aware that we have room for improvement, then we can continue to get to a place where everyone feels equal. And that's ultimately what I'm striving for. I'm hoping that, I have a 6-month-old. He actually got 6 months today, or tomorrow, 6-month-old nephew. And I'm hoping that by the time he is 18 and driving around and going to parties and stuff, that he won't have to worry about this stuff, at least in South Jersey. So if we can do that, then I feel like we're doing a lot. And, I've talked a lot. We have about, I don't want to spend all night here, and we have about, I guess, 15 minutes. I'd love to hear from some of you guys. I know, and Tisha, you have your hand raised. Feel free to say what you want to say.
Okay, no, you see, I still raise my hand. Like April, I am, a professionally trained teacher as well. So one thing, April, we heard this all the time, is self-reflection. And I think a lot of self-reflection has to be done within the individual person. And I think also people have to accept that they have biases, and is nothing wrong with having biases. Like, I prefer mustard instead of ketchup on my hot dogs. There's nothing wrong with that. However, how do I react to that? If somebody put ketchup on my hot dog, do I throw it at them? So I think a lot of people have a problem with just self-reflection and accepting their biases, and then how do they respond to those biases? I'm gonna be honest with you. I went to Iraq 2 times. I have a bias, or against I don't like Middle Easterns. I know I do. Do I, when I see them, do I say, oh my God, nothing like that? But I can feel my whole mood change, and once I recognize that, I work to change that. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's where a lot of to see change, a lot of people have to change themselves as well. Change is not going to happen if a person doesn't look within themselves and change that one aspect about them. Trevor Noah had asked the question. He was on a podcast called The Breakfast Club, and he asked, where do racist people go? Like, when they're found to be racist, they get fired. Okay, where do they go after that? Do they go to a school to not be racist anymore? What happens? Where do they go? And ever since I heard him ask that question, I asked myself, where do they go? Do they get any type of training? And I don't want to say training, because sometimes a person doesn't even realize they are racist until it's pointed out to them. What I think needs to happen is they need to be mainstreamed into that culture that they have, that they are racist towards, and so they can see that, wait a minute, racism, because racism is not it's emotion. I'm just so big. I feel like that's a learned thing, because in the military, I've been, with all cultures, all types of races and everything. And if you heard some of the jokes that we've said to each other, some people be like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But that's how we relate. That's how we got over these biases we had for each other. And I think, and I love the fact in the data, a lot of people said that they want to have a better relationship, starting with their neighbors. That says a lot. So that means these people are looking at themselves saying, I want to have this better relationship so I can make a change. And I think that's where it all starts.
Right. Yeah, you made a few really good points. I think that you can't address a problem until you recognize that there is one, right? And that's true with both individuals and systems. I think individual racism is much more complicated, because you'd have to have a extreme sense of self-awareness and ability to look at your implicit biases. But that's why we want to deal with systems, because I think that you can look at, there's raw data. Your memory is your own perception, but the data is what the data is. I'd like to ask the people that we have here, Jessica, Ivory, Sean, what would you like to see in Merchantville to change? What changes would you like to see made? What do you think that an organization like Collab could help with? If you have any ideas about, I know, Ivory, you mentioned something before.
Yeah, I'd like to, I guess, reiterate that point. Whether it be Collab, whether it be the diversity community, or a collaboration between the two organizations, I would like to see specifically some kind of stance taken by both organizations, or maybe just the community of Merchantville at large, where we can acknowledge Black Lives Matter as a movement. And maybe that can be something that can be creatively painted on the walking trail, or right there on Center Street between the trail, that says Mercerville supports and recognizes and supports Black Lives Matter, you know, as an organization, as a movement. I think that in itself is a very powerful and progressive stance to take. And it really starts to invite dialogue and engagement towards change, towards progressive change. Legislative, changing laws, that's, you know, that's things that takes time. But as a immediate response or recognition of taking steps towards the right direction, I think that would be something dynamic and powerful.
Excellent.
Snowball off of that too, and also off of what Antisha had said. I mean, obviously, seeing more of us represented on all levels of government, that's a huge thing for me. But going back to like, and honestly, like during the pandemic, I think a lot of people took the time to sit alone with themselves and their thoughts and to see the biases that they have inside, especially like during the more volatile months, June, July, August, this summer. I run, I'm a runner. So, you know, me running through the town, it gives me a lot of hope seeing the Black Lives Matter signs on people's lawns, and that, you know, the different signs of, you know, hate has no home here. But I do have to wonder though, and this is what I would like to see change with my neighbors. It's nice seeing those signs, but I always go back to asking people, even like my more progressive friends who, you know, live in these beautiful white neighborhoods with, you know, they might have one or two Black friends, which is great. But like, you know, their parents, or even like their neighbors too. It's nice seeing those signs, but have they ever invited a Black person in their house? Have you ever had a Black person over for tea or for coffee or something that's not serving you, just to have a person of color meet your neighbor? I would like to see that more, if anything. Starting that dialogue with your neighbors, not just, you know, putting the sign on your front lawn or having the black screen that time that we did that one time in June, but actually, like, you know, getting to know somebody, because I think that helps a lot. And I think that, you know, as diverse as our schools are, I think it's great that these kids, you know, our children get to have different friends and everything, but their parents, I think that we could probably take it a step further. So I would like to see that.
Excellent idea. Miss Caroline Waters or Sean, you know, Miss Caroline, you can go first.
Hi, everybody. I'm here. Bridget invited me, and I'm so glad that she did, because I'm meeting so many new people, and I'm so excited. I'm sitting here so excited. I would say that I've had various experiences. I'm on the Mercerville Diversity Committee. I'm also on the PTA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I unsuccessfully ran for the Board of Education about 3 years ago because of my concern with the school. I love that the government is making changes. I love that the police department are making changes, but there's got to be something done about the school. My experience with the school has been awful. We started with using school choice. I lived in Pennsauken for 20 years. Like Ivory, I grew up in Camden, got ticketed in Merchantville for speeding behind a school bus at 8:15 in the morning. So yes, there was nothing but Black and brown people at the court, and the prosecutor coerced me to taking a plea. So that happened to me. I've had recent experiences with a neighbor who approached my son about playing basketball in our driveway. And I say, imagine if the police would have shown up and the white officer played basketball with my son, what would happen to that neighbor? They would have been shocked, right? I would love to see Merchantville police. They did that in Pennsauken. I lived in Pennsauken for 20 years, and it was nothing to see an officer pull over and play basketball with my son. And I thought that was wonderful. Pennsauken does a very good job with policing. But the school system, when we used school choice for my son when he started in 5th grade, we ended up moving to Merchantville because we wanted to go on with Haddon Heights School instead of Pennsauken High School, because unfortunately the school system in Pennsauken is not the same. So we moved into Merchantville. Since he was in 5th grade, I've been going to Board of Education meetings. I've been asking for, even meeting with Mr. Strong one-on-one, asking for him to diversify the faculty. Has yet to happen. I tell him the Spanish teacher does not count. I'm sorry, that does not count. I want to see something else. I went to the Board of Education. I was told that when they hired Mr. Strong, he had full range to hire as he pleased. They could not tell him what to do. So I said to them, then that means this is a token board. How could you not give him goals to meet as a principal of the school? That makes no sense to me. My son is graduating Haddon Heights this year, so I've been dealing with this for many, many years. Recently, as I shared with Bridget, the school has called diapers on me twice because I spanked my children. My husband spanked one and I spanked the other. I finally had to threaten the school that I would sue them if they called diapers on me one more time because they don't understand cultural competencies. My culture spanks children. I didn't abuse my children. My children, when diapers came to my house, they found that there was no abuse. The second time they came to my house, a social worker made it her business to call the person that reported me to explain to her what abuse looks like before you waste their time. That was her conversation with us. So I had another meeting with the school, with I knew who did it, but I had a meeting with all of them, Mr. Strong, and I said, the social worker told me I can spank him. The law tells me I can spank him, and my Bible tells me I can spank him. I'm going to spank him again if I have to. And if you call the diapers again on me, I'm going to sue you. They've never called diapers again. So it shouldn't take to that point that these individuals, don't understand culture. And I've asked, have your teachers, the staff, have they been trained in learning culture? Because this is why this happened to me. I said, I'm a social worker, I'm a state worker, my husband works with the elderly. I could lose my job. My husband could lose. Now you're threatening my livelihood, and I have a serious problem with that because no one called me to even ask me anything. You called diapers. My 17-year-old got stripped by the nurse at the high school to check his body for bruises. Merchantville called them and told them to do that, not the social worker. So this is the experiences I've had. Another experience was they wanted me to have my son tested because they said that he was having behavioral issues. And when I walked into the room, they said, this is what has happened. We need you to sign on this dotted line so we can get him tested. No, I'm not. What? No. And as I started to find out from other parents of color, they were being approached as well. So when I came back for the second meeting, I asked them how many children of color were in those piles and how many were white. They said they couldn't answer that question. And I said, well, from the white friends that I do know, I've asked them and none of them have gotten approached, but most of the parents of color that I've approached have gotten approached. And so these are the problems I've had with the school. I've gone to Mr. Strong for years, the Board of Education. I've yet to see change. And it's a concern for me because I was asked, why won't I put my son on medication? I said, well, because I birthed him. And when the pediatrician tells me that it's time, then that's what I'll do. But it's not going to be done by a bunch of, and I'm sorry, white women in a special, in the child study team telling me this is what you have to do with your child. Without an assessment, without a doctor looking at him, you have got to be kidding me if you think I'm going to do that. So I went through the proper channels and went through children's. I did it on my own. The school did not tell me these were my options. I found out from another school district. And so these are the issues going on in the school right now. My son has a friend last year spent him most of the time on a cot in the classroom because he's so medicated. This is what's happening to some of the Black and brown kids at Merchantville School. And it has got to stop. My son is in 5th grade and I told him, you got 3 more years to see my face until something happens. I don't have these issues at the high school. I don't understand why. That's a more white school system than it is over here. I don't have those issues at the high school. So it's here at Merchantville and something has got to be done about the school system.
Well, I definitely agree that, with more representation, there might be more cultural understanding, and that's something that we could definitely try to address. I think that's on our platform that we've talked about earlier tonight, is trying to get some more representation. There's a lot of studies that show that Black and brown, particularly boys, are educated differently and punished more frequently in the school system, and that there's a lot of different, they're treated differently. And that's something that should be brought to the awareness of every school district. because it's not fair, and it affects you and affects the families in a lot of different ways. And that's there's I don't have enough data to really go into everything that you said, but it's troubling for me to hear that has been your experience in there, and that's something that we definitely want to address, because I think that it's important that black black and brown kids are given an equal opportunity for education and brought up with pride in themselves and pride in their culture, and and pride in who they are. That I think a lot of times that gets uh, if you don't celebrate your culture, if you feel like you're being picked on, especially or picked out of the group because of your color or your race, then that can be detrimental to you down the line in ways that you won't really be able to necessarily pinpoint. So I think that you brought up some very good issues, and things that we might need to address. Sean, I know you've been in here. I'd love to hear, what you thought about the presentation and the data, and what Merchantville could do better, and how we could help facilitate a better experience for Black people in that area.
For me, I didn't really have anything to really bring to the conversation already, but it was just good hearing what everybody else was talking about, just so I could sit on it really and bring something when I do come back. I mean, I could emphasize the Black Lives Matter on the walk trail and everything. Like, that would be something I would like to see. And I mean, I don't go to Merchantville schools anymore. I'm in college now. But even when I was at the school, there wasn't much diversity then. So I can put some emphasis on that too.
Excellent. Well, if you heard anything you like here, I think that, it'd be cool for you to join up, volunteer if you could.
Yes,
We are
sir.
looking for volunteers. We're looking for help, or donations. As I said, I didn't want to keep everybody here all night. Ryan, I don't know, Ryan, he's the quiet one, but yeah, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say before I start signing off.
I mean, I think we've said everything, and as an organization, we've done our research phase, and we're formulating and building relationships and seeing how we can help provide resources and information like the data, and what we can do collaboratively with local government, school board, to make things better, even better than it is, because seems like everything's moving in the right direction. So we just want to, things can always get better, and that's what we're here to do. So let's do it. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. I just also want to mention that while we are currently working in Merchantville, we do have plans to move to other communities. We really want to connect with the people here, because and even after we leave, we love to be in contact and be of service, and we'd like to leave behind a branch of Collab, which will be made up by the citizens of
Yeah, so
of the
real
township
quick.
we're in.
Sorry. Yeah, so real quick, that is our model here. So we want to encourage activism everywhere, like Kyle was saying, especially making Black people feel more comfortable getting involved, because what's the percentage? Was 35%?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So, but that there's not 35% teachers, and there's not 35% people on council, school board, etc. And so we want to try to encourage that in local communities. So we're starting in Merchantville because we have some allies here and resources, but we want to take this model where we go into each community and try to find the needs and encourage inclusion and people getting involved, and especially with government, because when you change the system, people feel more comfortable. I know, like Kyle was saying, people feel uncomfortable. I know when in my town, when I first moved here, I felt a little uneasy going into the municipal building for the council meetings. The police are there, they have guns, our relationship with that is a bit uncomfortable. So that's our organization's whole goal, and we want to do it in a positive, collaborative way as much as possible. And that's why we really are focusing here in Merchantville, because there's a lot of allies here that believe the same thing. And, I always have a phrase that, like, you don't need racist people to have a racist system. So it seems like many people are on board. It's just like with the police situation, that information was in a PDF. So how would they even know that that is happening, right? So now information is getting out there, and maybe now that can be looked at more. Obviously, there needs to be some more work because how, Camden obviously is majority black. People are taking 130 down, so maybe those numbers are a little bit different. But again, this is why we have these conversations and see everyone's position and what we can do about it. So,
right. Well, I'd love to, Ryan, that was very well said. That's exactly where I was going. I'd love to thank everybody that participated. Thank you to Bridget and April for being such wonderful board members and helping to organize Collab and keep it going. They do a really great job. Thank you to Councilperson Andy McClune for joining in and staying around and sticking around and giving your thoughts. I really appreciate that. Thank you to Ivory and Antisha for lending your testimony. Thank you to Caroline as well for lending your testimony and letting us know about more ways that we could be helpful. And thank you to Jessica for joining and providing, some insight into what's needed and how we could be of help. And, if you're watching, we appreciate you watching and participating and sharing. We had a great round of our first wave of fundraising for Giving Tuesday. And I thank everybody for everyone who did all that. And we are looking forward to making some real changes in the future. We have a date set up. Bridget, do you know what the date is of the diversity initiative, so we could have, if people were marking their calendars? I'm not sure exactly what the date is, but we do have some upcoming events. You could find everything at collabnj.org. And I just thank you everybody for joining in. See you guys later.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kyle.
everyone. Have a great evening.
All right, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Good
Thanks
night.
again, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Ryan, Kyle, great job, gentlemen.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, April. Later, Bridget.